This is the Blood Red podcast from the Liverpool Echo.
Hello and welcome back to the Blood Red podcast. I'm Matt Addison and today we're taking an in-depth look at a player who's been linked with Liverpool over the last few months and indeed the last few days, and who could possibly be a Gini Wijnaldum successor. German midfielder Florian Neuhaus has all of the hallmarks of a top midfield player, and at 24 his time could have come to make the next step to another club after spending a couple of years at Borussia Monchengladbach. Ahead of his national side Germany taking on France in their Euro 2020 opener, I'm joined first and foremost by German outlet Sport 1's chief football reporter Florian Plettenberg to get the inside track on a possible transfer for the player and to explore what type of player Neuhaus is and whether he could be a useful option for Jurgen Klopp at Liverpool. Florian reported on Friday that Jurgen Klopp is keen on the player, while the Echo understands that Neuhaus is an option for the Reds if they do choose to replace Wijnaldum and sign a midfielder this summer. So I got the latest from Germany on that, and then after that I was joined by Josh Williams for a scouting and analytical look at Neuhaus. But first, here's German journalist Florian Plettenberg. Florian, thanks for joining me. I'm really intrigued actually by Florian Neuhaus. I mean, he's been linked with Liverpool for a while now. Do you think Liverpool would be right to be interested in him? Is he a good player?
Absolutely. So first of all, I can confirm that information. To my information, there has been a contact between the management of the player and the bosses from Liverpool. So as you can see, Liverpool is highly interested in Florian Neuhaus, but it's clear because he's a very versatile player. He's a very flexible, very talented. He's a very important player of the German national team and one of the best players in the German Bundesliga. So we have to say, okay, maybe it's possible that a German player is going abroad, but there are no concrete negotiations right now. But Liverpool, they are definitely interested in signing Neuhaus.
I know you've spoken to him before, you've seen a lot of him play. I mean, is a move away from Borussia Monchengladbach the next step for him? Do you think it's likely that he'll move somewhere, be it this summer or next summer maybe?
Absolutely. The question is, when will he do that step? He has a contract until 2024. He has no release clause. But to my information, it's clear that if there is an offer this summer, maybe around 45 million euro, then there will be talks between his management and his agent is Christian Nerlinger, a former Bayern Munich player and a very important guy in the Bundesliga. So there will talks with him and the manager of Borussia Monchengladbach, Max Eberl. So I think it's possible, but it's more likely that he move in the next summer, so 2022. But it's all dependent from the situation, what Liverpool maybe is doing. Are they putting some numbers on the table or not? So it's possible, but Neuhaus definitely want to make the next step. But he has also said a lot of times that he's feeling very comfortable in Gladbach.
There has been some links with Real Madrid, with Bayern Munich as well. Do you think there's other teams as well as Liverpool that would be interested?
Well, you have to say that for the player and his management is very important to make that the next step for him is the right step. He want to make the next step, but it's very important for him that it's the best club, the best feeling for him in his stomach. This is something what he has told me, that he wants to have a good feeling in the talks, and he wants to know that the next club of him is really, really interested in him and that the club needs him. That's very important for him. So for sure, Real Madrid, they are also interested and Bayern Munich is interested as well. But for Bayern Munich, for example, he's too expensive this summer because Bayern Munich has to save his money because we all know Corona crisis. It has had an influence on the financial situation of the club. So I think the only clubs who can pay the money for Neuhaus this summer are clubs from the Premier League, maybe Liverpool. And Liverpool, this is what I can tell you, is the club who is the most interested club in or for Neuhaus.
Germany have so many good midfielders. Are Liverpool fans going to be able to see Neuhaus in the European Championships? I mean, you look at Ilkay Gundogan, Toni Kroos, Leon Goretzka. Is Neuhaus going to be in that squad and get lots of minutes this summer?
Boy, definitely hard to answer you that question. What I can tell you is that he has a lot of good performance. He made a lot of good performances in the German national dress. Sure, you have Toni Kroos. He's the most important player for Bundestrainer Joachim Löw. Then you have İlkay Gündoğan. They will start against France in the central midfield. Then you have Leon Goretzka. He was injured, but he's now ready to make the next steps. But I think that he will start against Portugal. So Neuhaus is the first option right now for Bundestrainer Joachim Löw if anything happens with Gündoğan or with Kroos, because maybe you know that Joshua Kimmich, he has shown his world class in the central midfield at Bayern Munich, but in the German national team, he has to go on the right side.
And in terms of the type of midfielder that he is, what could you say about Neuhaus? How does he play? Is there somebody that you could compare him to, maybe?
I can compare him to Leon Goretzka. Leon Goretzka is a typical box-to-box midfielder. This is what I want to say, is that he's very good in the defense, but he has a lot of power in the offense line. And Goretzka is a player, you can see him often between the lines. Kimmich is more defense, but Neuhaus is like Goretzka, and he's very good in front of the goal. He has made a lot of goals, and he's a kind of a dangerous player. And so this is what I told you. He's very versatile, very flexible. He can also play on the wings, but he's technically very, very good and physically very good. So a very interesting player, and I think it's the perfect player for Jurgen Klopp. But he's also a very interesting player for Julian Nagelsmann, maybe for Bayern Munich in the next year.
Yeah, he scored 6 and assisted 6 in 33 league games last season. Those are pretty good numbers for a midfielder. Is that a big part of his game, or is it more a case that he can do that, but he can also do other things as well?
Do you ask me if it's why he has shot so many goals, or?
Yeah. I mean, is that a big part of his game, or is he more somebody who can just do everything?
No, sure. This is something what makes him special, that he's able to score goals and that he's able to win tackles. And this is a very, very important mixture, and you cannot find it so often if you look on the top midfielders in the world right now. So Neuhaus, to my mind, he has the quality for the next big step, for the next big club, and I'm convinced that he would make, or that he will make, a step to one of the top 4, top 5, top 6 teams in the world.
There's been some different reports about his release clause in his contract. Do you know whether there is still that, or has that expired now? Is that no longer in that contract?
So I can tell you that he has right now no release clause. He had one, but it was a kind of option that you say, okay, if there is an offer this summer, then the Gladbach bosses, they have to speak with the management of Neuhaus. And right now, that release clause is not stable anymore. But like I told you, if there is that big offer, Gladbach has to deal with it. So they all need the million, they all need the transfer fees, but Gladbach, they have a lot of problems in the midfield. They have to deal with Matthias Ginter, one of the other German national players. His contract is guilty until 2022. The next thing is Dennis Zakaria, another very important player for Borussia Monchengladbach. So Gladbach manager Max Eberl, he has to deal with a lot of important players. Neuhaus is one of them. So I think that they will do everything to keep Florian Neuhaus, but as you know, Gladbach is not qualified for the Champions League, and this is a tournament what has been very, very important for Neuhaus, for his development. So I can really imagine that he would love to make the step this summer, but like I said, it's more likely maybe the next summer.
Do you think the fact that Jurgen Klopp is Liverpool's manager would have any influence? Does he have a big pull in Germany to bring players to the club? Yeah,
sure. We all know that Jurgen Klopp is a trainer who has shown that he can develop players, that he can make him better. And Jurgen Klopp, I have never heard a player who didn't say, I cannot imagine to work with him. So sure, Jurgen Klopp knows the manager of Florian Neuhaus. Florian Neuhaus, he knows Jurgen Klopp very well. So it could be a perfect match. And as you know, Emre Can has played at Liverpool. So you have made a good experience in Liverpool with German players like Didi Hamann. And I can imagine that Florian Neuhaus would fit very, very well to the Anfield Road.
And in terms of his injury record, it seems like he never gets injured. I think that's really important for Liverpool to replace Gini Wijnaldum, who also never got injured. I think the last time Neuhaus picked up an injury was 2017. He just never misses a game.
Ahmed, you're really, really well informed. That's also very important, and that makes him special. He's very professional. He's very smart. You can... If you speak with him, you can see that he's very open-minded. So he knows what he has to do to make the best performances. And you spoken about Gini Wijnaldum, the contact between his management and the Liverpool bosses. It has been after it was clear that Gini Wijnaldum will leave Liverpool. So I think it's very important for the club that they know, okay, Neuhaus is a player who is not injured, that he can make a lot of matches, a lot of games. And so maybe that could be an advantage for him.
In terms of the Bundesliga midfielders, where does Neuhaus rank? Is he one of the top midfielders? How high do you think you would rate him?
What would you say is who is the top midfielder in the Bundesliga?
Oh, now you're testing me. I suppose maybe the question is he good enough to go and play, say, for Bayern Munich, for example? Could he get into that team?
I definitely think so. But if you say that the benchmark is Joshua Kimmich or Leon Goretzka, then you have to say Florian Neuhaus is one of the best five. I would say he's under the top 5 in the Bundesliga midfielders. So he has the quality and the talent to get his breakthrough in a top club. He's playing very constantly. That is also very important. But the question is, what do you need? Do you need the box-to-box midfielder? Do you need a bull terrier like Joshua Kimmich, like a Gennaro Gattuso type of midfielder? So Neuhaus is not that loudspeaker. He's very quiet on the place, but he has a lot of self-confidence, and that makes him special. So I'm absolutely convinced that he can make the step to a club like Liverpool. Sure.
And just one last question then. In terms of being at Gladbach, he's worked under Marco Rose, his former manager, obviously now moved to Borussia Dortmund. How good a coach is he? And do you think he would have helped Neuhaus develop over the last couple of years?
Marco Rose now?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, but he's going to Borussia Dortmund, as you know.
Yes, yeah, of course. But how good a coach is he? And did he help to develop Neuhaus?
Yeah, he has developed him for sure. But in the first days of Marco Rose, the situation of Neuhaus was not clear. He didn't play constantly, but he has worked so good that Marco Rose, he had no other choice, to put him in the starting line. But what I also have to say, maybe you know that Florian Neuhaus is a big fan of Bayern Munich, and his father, he is one of the biggest fans of Bayern Munich. So what I wanted to say is that Bayern Munich is totally in the race about him, but the question is the price. So I would say if he's really going abroad, and I have asked Florian Neuhaus, can you imagine to go abroad? And he said, sure. I'm not fear about that step. So he really told me, it was last week, I can imagine to go abroad, and I need not to go to Bayern Munich. I'm totally open. I'm totally flexible. So, but Marco Rose, he was a very important coach for him, but not the most important. I think Joachim Löw, he has helped him a lot as well. So we will see. Maybe Jurgen Klopp is putting him on the next top level.
Yeah, absolutely. Florian Plettenberg, chief reporter at Sport 1. Thank you very much for joining me. Really appreciate your insight.
Thank you, Matt. Take care. Bye-bye.
And I'm now joined by tactics and scouting writer Josh Williams of the Analysing Anfield podcast. And Josh, let's just start with some sort of general thoughts really on Neuhaus. I know he's a player that you're interested by. What do you make of him?
Yeah, well, he's been linked to the club for quite a while. But to be honest, usually when that sort of stuff happens, I would go and look at the player. But for some reason with Neuhaus, I've never really delved into him that much up until fairly recently. Obviously, he's made the Germany squad for the Euros and things like that. Wijnaldum's left. So I've made more of an attempt to understand his game more recently, and he just seems to tick a fair few boxes when it comes to a typical Liverpool signing and when it comes to replacing Wijnaldum as well. Just absolute basics. Like when it comes to watching him, he doesn't really shine too much. He's not the player who'd stand out, and he doesn't come across to me as a potential world beater and like that. He just comes across as a sensible buy for a club who needs to add, really. Like a little thing, for example, is he hasn't been injured since 2017, which is the type of thing that obviously Wijnaldum offered, and the type of thing that is nice to add if you're adding a player, a player who's always available, never injured. If you look at his age, he's 24, just approaching what I deem to be peak he is. Quite a versatile midfield profile. So he just makes sense in a lot of areas, while also, from the perspective of like the eye test, maybe you'd label it as, he just looks good. He looks okay. As I said, he wouldn't tick, maybe trying to think of some midfielders who, like I say, Thiago. If you watch Thiago, you can quite clearly see he's an above average level player, and he's just elite at the end of the day. If you watch Neuhaus, he's not so much in that bracket really. But if you look at the package as a whole, it just looks like it makes sense. And I'm just kind of increasingly getting on the side of this might happen, this deal.
It sort of sounds from what you say there that stylistically he would be a good fit for Liverpool. I think he's been linked with Real Madrid, Bayern Munich, some of the teams that you might expect, particularly Bayern with him being in Germany. But sort of that kind of under the radar, understated, but very good. I mean, it's basically Gini Wijnaldum, isn't it?
Yeah, it's very, very similar. Wijnaldum came to Liverpool with quite an offensive skill set, and Klopp was able to just use him as he wanted, really, because of how adaptable he was. And I think Neuhaus, although maybe he hasn't posted the number of goals Wijnaldum has over the course of his career before he arrived at Anfield, I think Wijnaldum spent time at PSV, Feyenoord, and Newcastle United, and I think in at least one domestic season for each of those teams, he posted double figures in the goals department. Neuhaus isn't quite that, but he does have that quite well-rounded skill set that can just be adapted and stuff. Like if you look at the season this year, he's played predominantly as part of a midfield 2, but it looks like he can get further forward. It looks like he could form part of a midfield 3, and it looks like maybe he could, if he was in part of a midfield 3, maybe he could play as an 8, maybe he could even play as a 6. So he looks quite adaptable, really. And, when it comes to the Wijnaldum comparisons, I do see it, specifically when it comes to the availability and being able to adapt across different needs.
You mentioned there he's got, obviously, goals from midfield. I think it was 8 in all competitions this season, and that's something that Liverpool don't really have. I mean, Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain can do that, but doesn't seem that he's been trusted by Jurgen Klopp this season. How important is it, do you think, that Liverpool add that to their midfield and get that? Maybe it doesn't have to be 15, 20, but just to sort of get 8 to 10. How important could that be for Liverpool?
Yeah, well, I think it's something that Liverpool have been without. I actually addressed this on a recent Analysing Anfield podcast, I think, when I was talking about transfers, that Liverpool don't really have that player, and Liverpool have been good at adding whatever they don't have, really. If you look at Fabinho, Henderson, Thiago, possibly Curtis Jones, Naby Keita, the likes of these players, they don't really add a great deal in when it comes to the actual product in the final third, goals and finding the back of the net and stuff like that. Neuhaus, as you said, this year he's posted 6 goals and 5 assists in the Bundesliga. Season before, 4 goals and 2 assists. Season before, 3 goals and 8 assists, and season before that, 6 goals and 7 assists. So he looks like that kind of 6 goals and 1 assist. So he looks like that kind of player who, from midfield, will offer you about 8 to 10 league goals per season, which is quite valuable. When you look at over the course of a season, I think Brendan Rodgers famously said that if you're looking to get in the Champions League, you're looking about 70 goals, because roughly, based on studies that have been found, the number of goals that you score is roughly the number of points that you end up with, funnily enough. So if Liverpool are looking to win league titles, it's nice to get goals from elsewhere outside your front three. So if you can get goals from set pieces, if Trent Alexander-Arnold can score the odd goal, Andy Robertson maybe, and then goals from midfield from the likes of possibly Neuhaus.
And in terms of sort of merging the two bits together, obviously he does the attacking thing, he kind of gets those numbers, but his defensive work seems to be very good as well. That's kind of what Liverpool needs, isn't it? That sort of halfway house between getting those numbers, but doing the reliable, more boring bits that maybe Gini Wijnaldum did really well as well.
Yeah, he's certainly good without the ball. He's very good when it comes to anticipating, making interceptions and things like that. But actually, when it comes to pressing, which is what you'd obviously label as a key requirement for Liverpool, he seems to fall short in that department. And I'll throw in a caveat now, it could be as a result of Monchengladbach's approach, because they aren't really that much of a pressing team compared to other Bundesliga sides. But Neuhaus's number of pressures, defensive pressures per 90 per match is just not really that high. So maybe Liverpool understand why that is. Maybe Liverpool expect that to take a bit of a boost at Anfield if he was to come. And I will couple in with that as well, that arguably one of his weaknesses is his mobility. He's not the quickest across the ground. He's probably as fast as Wijnaldum is, maybe. I think maybe Wijnaldum could reach a greater top speed, but when you see Wijnaldum covering ground, that's about as fast as Neuhaus is. He's certainly not an Oxlade-Chamberlain, or I'd probably label Henderson as quicker than him as well. But I still think Liverpool would certainly not be interested in this player if he had defensive issues. And I think looking at his game, although he's not part of a pressing team at the minute, if you like, I do think he shows signs that he'd be able to cope.
Yeah, it's certainly something Liverpool have done in the past. Klopp's done in the past with Wijnaldum, in fact, sort of changing that role within that midfield. And I think it's really interesting that he's obviously played for Borussia Monchengladbach as well under Marco Rose, now moving to Borussia Dortmund, previously at Red Bull Salzburg as well. I mean, we keep coming back to this Liverpool and Red Bull link. How important do you think that would be in this? And how important do you think it could be that obviously Neuhaus has played under Marco Rose, who possibly has some similarities to Jurgen Klopp in the kind of style that he plays as well?
Yeah, well, Rose is kind of deemed as a bit of a disciple of Klopp's, really. He's played under Klopp before, learned a lot from him, and he's referenced him since as, someone that he looks up to. Klopp's referenced Rose as someone who's doing well and who he wants to do well and things like that. So, given that how thorough Liverpool's recruitment tends to be, I wouldn't be surprised if there's been some form of, or if there's going to be some form of character reference there, maybe where Klopp speaks to Rose, or because Rose is leaving anyway. Rose is going to Dortmund. So I wouldn't be surprised if there's some form of character reference in there, and it's just another way of Liverpool, I suppose, minimising the risk around a signing. If a player's performed in certain surroundings for the likes of Rose, maybe he'll be applicable to Klopp. If he's had a character reference that ticks that box. And then also, got to throw in there, with him being very rarely injured, he's played at least 2,000 league minutes in each of the past 3 Bundesliga seasons. So despite being 24 years old, Liverpool then have a fair amount there to go on in terms of, say for example, when you sign a one-season wonder, that player could have a fluke season. That it does happen. Whereas if a player's been doing it for 3 or 4 consecutive seasons, Liverpool then have a much better gauge on what this player is. And I think there's the odd player in Europe who is younger than 25, but has plenty of seasons behind him. And I think Neuhaus is one of them. So just looking at him, although he's not the type to maybe light up the pitch, he just looks like a very low risk signing who would certainly do a job at Anfield and certainly be able to replace a lot of what Wijnaldum was offering.
Yeah, and at 24 as well, I suppose it's always important for Liverpool to get these players who are ready to make that next step. But as you say, have got that experience. He's played in the Champions League. He's played for a fairly big Bundesliga club. It's maybe not too much of a jump to think that he could make that step to Liverpool and step up again.
No, I mean, that's the idea. I mean, Liverpool have kind of went through a bit of a phase with Klopp. The squad now is kind of in the win now situation, maybe. Henderson's now 30, Milner's about 34. Wijnaldum's just left, but he was 29, 30 at the time. So I think it is important always, when you get to a point where you kind of just freshen up, basically. It's a bit of a cliche, but it is kind of needed, and you need to get those players in who still haven't tasted maybe that silverware and they want to kind of add to their collection. And Neuhaus at the age of 24, although he's still got 3 years left on his deal, which puts Gladbach in a strong negotiation situation. I do think he fits that mould of a player who Klopp can kind of transform once he gets to Anfield and make him make that last step where he starts to win in his career.
Yeah, absolutely. There's no doubt whatsoever that Florian Neuhaus could move on from Borussia Monchengladbach some point soon. Liverpool, of course, will be aware. He might just fit the Liverpool profile, but we'll have to wait and see whether or not Michael Edwards is tempted. For now, though, from myself, Matt Addison, and my guests, Florian Plettenberg and Josh Williams, thanks for listening, and goodbye for now.
This is the Blood Red Podcast from the Liverpool Echo.